So in the course we've been looking at the way various moral theories try to instruct us on animal agriculture. And what we're going to look at today is a certain kind of moral theory proposed by the philosopher Reagan and a neighbor of that theory proposed by another philosopher, Mary Ann Warren, and try and see what they say about animal agriculture. And what we'll see is that subtly different moral views, that is, subtly different views about what makes certain actions right or wrong, will tell us different things to do when it comes to using animals for agriculture. So what I want to look at first is Tom Reagan's argument that animal agriculture is not moral. So the basic argument goes like this. The first premise is, according to the best moral theory, we have rights because we have inherent value. Okay, so that's a ethical principle. It says why certain people or certain things in general have rights. It's because they have inherent value. The next premise is that everyone who has inherent value has it equally. So anything that has any inherent value whatsoever has it to the same degree as any other. The next premise is the ability to experience and capacities for pleasure and pain are one thing that we should take as evidence for having inherent value. So anything that has these capacities, we should generally assume has inherent value. So the next bit says, well, hey, animals have inherent value because they can experience, they can have pleasure, they can have pain. Furthermore, animals have the same inherent value because they have some. And finally, it seems to follow that animals have the same rights we do. Okay, so this argument says we can only use animals for agriculture if we think it's okay to use humans for agriculture. The general consensus in moral theory is that it's not okay to eat humans. So it seems to follow, according to Tom Reagan's moral theory, that we should not use animals for agriculture for the same reasons that we shouldn't use humans for agriculture. All right, so we saw the key bit in this argument is the claim that the best moral theory rests on our inherent value. So what is Tom Reagan's argument for that? He needs to say why we should adopt such a moral theory. Well, we're not going to go into the full details of his argument for that, but basically what he does is he looks at various moral theories, points out problems for them, and says that inherent value-based approach does best. So maybe we can at least look at one moral theory that we've also discussed in this MOOC and see what he says about that. So this other moral theory is utilitarianism, and he argues that on basic considerations, utilitarianism has some problems. For example, utilitarianism, again, which says, do that which brings about the best balance of happiness and freedom from pain. He says, well, think about a woman who could sacrifice herself, let's say, to save many others by allowing her organs to be harvested. It seems maybe okay to let someone do that, but it seems wrong to demand someone to do that. But on a utilitarian account, where let's say 10 people continue good lives at the expense of one person's life ending, it seems utilitarianism says we have to do that. We should sacrifice this person. So that seems like a problem for utilitarianism. Reagan says, because utilitarianism has that problem, we should give it a different account of why we have moral values. The reason we have moral values on his account, again, is because of inherent value. Because this woman has inherent value, we don't have the moral obligation to end her life to save others. Mary Ann Warren has criticized his claim that inherent value-based approaches to morality are the best. So, for example, she says that we should instead adopt an account which doesn't characterize inherent value in the very fuzzy way Tom Reagan does. So, for example, when you ask Tom Reagan, or you read his work, what exactly constitutes having inherent value? It's a bit difficult to answer. It just seems like this, he says, it's this basic thing that people have. I can give you some evidence for it, namely based on whether the thing can experience the world and so on, but he can't really say anything more what it is to have inherent value. So Warren says the best moral theory cannot, contrary to Reagan, rely on inherent value. It should instead rely on sentience and rationality. She says animals lack the relevant kind of rationality, but possess the relevant kind of sentience. So animals have rights, but they're weaker ones than the rights that humans have. precisely because they lack this kind of rationality. So the important premise here is again a premise in moral theory about what the best moral theory says. Marianne Warren comes up with a much more moderate position. She says that we should respect the rights to creatures in proportion to how much rationality and sentience they have. So as a result, she thinks that when we approach animal agriculture, we should think that any creature whose natural mode of life includes the pursuit of certain satisfactions has the right not to be forced to exist without the opportunity to pursue those. And furthermore, she thinks that any creature which is capable of pain, suffering, or frustration has the right that such experiences not be deliberately inflicted upon it without some compelling reason. And finally, that no sentient being should be killed without good reason. But that doesn't rule out animal agriculture altogether. What it rules out, again, is not let's say, caging up animals and preventing them from having access to their natural environment. So she thinks, for example, it would be wrong to keep hens in a totally artificial environment where they can't express their natural instincts. Furthermore, she thinks it would be wrong to brutally kill those hens. So we need to, according to Warren, come up with a better agricultural practice that allows those kind of natural instincts to be expressed and allows us to end the lives of the animals in a way that doesn't cause disproportionate suffering.